Good afternoon or good evening or good morning, my lovely students. It's time to travel to the Indian subcontinent. And if you haven't figured it out already, India dominates this course. But I'm telling you, man, it's going to be the largest country on earth here within your lifetime. It's going to catch China very soon. So it's time to delve into this fascinating corner of the world. I can't wait. So we have two essential questions for this presentation. The first one is, what impact did geography have on the development of the Indian subcontinent? Just a little tip. It had a lot of impact on the development of the Indian subcontinent. And then what groups migrated to the Indian subcontinent and where are they from, why did they come, and what impact did these groups have? So what impact geography and who were the earliest migrants? Now, when you talk about the Indian subcontinent geographically, one word that keeps coming back is isolation. In other words, this pie-shaped piece of territory that hangs below the rest of Asia, the Eurasian landmass, is to a large extent isolated by geography. And because of that, India is different than the rest of Asia. The people look different. The language is different. The religion is different. The culture is different. The mindset is different. And that's because India, to a large extent, was very isolated from the rest of Asia. Now, if you look at this map of India here, you noticed to the lower left, there's the Arabian Sea. To the lower right is the Bay of Bengal. Below India is the Indian Ocean. But here's what really isolates India from the rest of Asia. These massive mountains called the Himalayas, which we'll talk about in just a few minutes. But on the other side, you have the Hindu Kush, which isolates India to the north and to the west. But there is no question that the primary migrations that come to India are going to come from the west. And we'll talk about the tremendous implications of this. To say that the Himalayas are tall mountains is about like saying it's cloudy in Ohio in February. The comment does not do justice to the message that you're trying to convey. I mean, the Himalaya mountains are, okay, you take the tallest Rocky Mountain, you're looking at roughly 15,000 feet. Take the tallest Alp, you're looking at roughly 15,000 feet. Mount Everest is almost 30,000 feet, people. So it's putting the highest Rocky and the highest Alp on top of each other. Isn't that wild? You're going to lose 100 degrees when you travel from sea level to the top of Mount Everest. Isn't that something? Over 100 degrees. It took till 1953 for anyone to even climb Mount Everest because the air is so thin and you needed oxygen. So we're talking about a significant natural barrier, one of the most incredible natural barriers on the planet. And just north of the Himalaya Mountains is the incredibly barren, rolling, desolate plateau of Tibet. So there's another natural barrier. Now on the northeast side, facing towards Europe, is the Hindu Kush, which is 25,000 feet. So again, we're talking about mountains that are 10,000 feet taller than the Rocky Mountains. So there's these massive mountains that insulate India, the Indian subcontinent, from virtually any interaction with other parts of the world. However, there is a passageway. It is one of the most amazing passageways in all of history. It is called the Khyber Pass. And through the Khyber Pass is going to pour invader after invader after invader. But this is what's important, people. All these invaders come from the northwest.
Of the monsoons.
Another very important concept in subcontinental geography is the monsoon winds. If you look at the map that I have there's a couple of arrows. There's some blue arrows that come from the Arabian Sea, and there's some red arrows that come from the plateau of Tibet, and these winds just pour over top of the Himalaya mountains like Niagara Falls pours over. So in India, there's only 2 seasons. The summer months are hot and wet. I mean, hot and wet. Moist, humid, warm air comes up from the Arabian Sea and dumps all this moisture, this life-giving moisture, on the Indian subcontinent. In the winter months, things cool off some and dry out a lot. Now, the monsoon winds have tremendous spiritual symbolism. They are incredibly spiritual to most Indians, as we're going to learn in our documentary. They're the life-giving rains that make the continent come to life. So understand the monsoon winds. They're very important. Now it's time to look at some migration patterns to the Indian subcontinent. Now, I have to tell you this story. A number of years ago, I had this pretty nerdy friend. I still have him as a friend, but I was looking for a good birthday present for him, and I didn't know what to get him. So National Geographic had this thing called the Genome Project, where you could spit, I don't know, in a vial, send it in, and they would analyze your saliva and tell you where your ancestors are from, which I thought was perfect for this guy. So I spent $100. He got this little kid. He was all excited, spitting this thing, sent it in there. Comes back and says, "You're from Africa." He's a white dude, but everybody comes from Africa, according to National Geographic. So I was like, really, $100 for that? But it was cool because they showed you the migration patterns that you went through, and it was very interesting. And guess what? The first migrants to the Indian subcontinent are from Africa. Hallelujah! And we're talking about probably 100,000 years ago. These folks worked their way out of Central Africa onto the Arabian Peninsula, across the Persian Gulf, and then down along the coast of India and settled in southern India. Now, this is significant because there's still a cultural division between southern and northern India. Southern Indians tend to be darker. They have different inclinations from a faith standpoint. There is some discrimination between northern and southern Indians, as we're going to talk about later. But the first great Indian migration comes from Africa. The second migration is truly epic, truly transformational. In the very western portions of Asia, in the extreme western portion of Asia, the extreme southeastern part of Europe, there's a region between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea called the Caucasus region. The Caucasus Mountains are there. The phrase Caucasian, white people, comes from this area. And around 10,000 years ago, this area was inhabited by these incredible nomads who were infected with wanderlust. And they loved to fight, and they loved to travel, and they loved to move. And if you can see by this map, they moved the west into Europe. They moved east into Siberia. But a significant portion of them dropped through the Khyber Pass into the Indian subcontinent. And their impact on the Indian subcontinent is going to be profound. With them, they brought the Hindu faith. These white, aggressive supermen came pouring into the Indian subcontinent about 3,500 years ago and changed everything. And that's what we're going to focus on. Now, some of you hear the word Aryan, and immediately you think of Adolf Hitler, the Aryan race. Guess what? We're talking about the same people. These were the Nazi supermen. Isn't the world a small place? So these white, nomadic, aggressive people come pouring into the Khyber Pass roughly about 1500 BCE, roughly 3,500 years ago. Now, some of you might ask the question, well, Mr. Sturdivant, you just talked about what formidable natural barriers the Hindu Kush and the Himalayas were, and they were. But remember, in between them is something called the Khyber Pass, and you see that arrow going right through the Khyber Pass. And this is the traditional entrance into the Indian subcontinent. The Aryans are going to pour through in 1750 BCE, but in 500 BC it's going to be the Persians. And then in 3000 BC it's going to be Alexander the Great. And later in our millennia, you're going to have the Muslims. So this is the traditional entrance into the Indian subcontinent. And every time someone comes, they impact the Indian subcontinent profoundly. So the subcontinent is this isolated area that is this wonderful blend of cultures and people, and most of the influences are going to come from the West, from Africa and from the Aryan invasion and later the Muslims and the Greeks. But what's interesting is even though it's a blend of influences from the West, there's also this metaphysical approach to life that is uniquely Asian. Buckle up. You're going to love this unit.